Welcome back.
Yeah, it's been a while.
Took a nice little summer break, summer hiatus.
Little hiatus. It's always good to recoup after a lot of creativity.
Is that what it was?
You gotta refill the creative juice tanks, right?
Well, I'd like to blame it on me being out of town and doing like summer vacation with the family,
Mm-hmm.
but I think ultimately it's also probably a little bit of like laziness and just you get used to not doing something.
I think they call it burnout.
No, it's
They call it burnout.
It's just easier to keep doing something if you're doing it versus
Yes.
like once you stop. You ever do that with like the gym or like working out
Yeah.
or eating healthy?
Once
The moment you break
you
it,
get the ball rolling, that's when you can continue doing it, right?
yes, but then likewise, when
Mm-hmm.
you stop the ball from rolling, it just kind of stays stopped.
Yeah, I have a treadmill that reminds me of that constantly.
Have you used it recently?
Not recently, no.
Yeah.
But I had the vision of being able to use a treadmill and watch it like a TV or something. I was like, oh yeah, because I heard people do that, and I was like, you know what? That sounds like a fantastic idea because I used to just run, in the neighborhood or wherever. But it can be very uninspiring quite quickly, especially if you don't listen to music or like a podcast. But I was like, you know what? I'm a visual storyteller. I could really learn. It's like that's how I watch. I don't know, any content nowadays. Whether it's like a movie or TV show, sometimes I'll watch it twice, like once for the story, and then again trying to like look at all the different angles. But I mean, that's just good practice, right? So I was like, you know what? I'm going to do these both. I'm going to run, work out, and then also watch some kind of program. But no, it's once I stopped, I kind of stopped. I think I went out of town for work or for a shoot, and then it just never got back on the treadmill.
It's like harder to restart it. So
Yeah.
this is kind of, we did 10 episodes of the podcast.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe there's an extra like 0.1 or 0.2 in there somewhere, a few bonus episodes, but
Yeah.
10 episodes of the podcast. Now this will be 11. And I think most recently we filmed and edited and published the Rainwater
Yes, the
collection.
harvesting.
Yeah, rainwater collection, rainwater harvesting,
Mm-hmm.
living off grid. We've done some other videos
Yes.
like since then, but that's the most recent one.
Mm-hmm.
And so I thought it'd be good for us to talk about that.
Sure. What do you want to talk about specifically?
I don't know, anything, everything. It's one of the challenges of
Mm-hmm.
filming most of our content in Arizona is that the summers are incredibly hot.
Extremely hot. Like 120 is probably the max, but easily over 110 degrees. Granted, it's a dry heat. I know a lot of people often ask or wonder like what it's like. It's like an oven. It's very much like an oven. There's no humidity, which is good, but you definitely sweat, and it's very uncomfortable, I would say, especially filming outside, which we do a lot.
Right. And so there is the balance of, okay, let's try and maintain production, keep the content going, but also save ourselves
Yes.
from having to work. And thankfully, the equipment we use doesn't really overheat. We don't have that problem. But ourselves, we could easily overheat. And so it tends to be the slower season for us, for the people we film with. The summer is just the kind of the downturn. But we did film with Tomas and his rainwater collection, rainwater harvesting setup, where he's at, which is kind of cool. And I thought we could, I don't know, just talk about that process and what you found interesting, what I found interesting.
The most interesting aspect that I found was that some states outlaw like collecting your own rainwater, which from what his perspective was, and it kind of made sense, but only briefly, was you're robbing the water from like the natural, the earth, right? But it kind of doesn't make sense because if you were going to build, let's say, a shed, you're already robbing the earth of that spot anyway, right? So the rain wasn't going to hit that spot anyway. You're going to have a shed there. So at least having the ability to harvest the water that hits the shed and having gutters that actually go to a tank, that seems pretty reasonable. But for some reason, it's outlawed in certain parts of the country.
Certain places, and a lot of people are surprised when they find that out because most places you can collect rainwater, so it's not widespread that it's like illegal. But the few places that it is illegal, quote unquote, hopefully that's not a trend for the future,
Right.
because it is this idea. I think some people get in their minds that you're stealing the rain from the ground, from the earth. But ultimately, when you drink water, what happens?
I mean,
go to the
aside
bathroom.
yeah, exactly. It's like you're going to replenish some
you're going
aspect
to
of
sweat,
the earth.
you're going to urinate,
Yeah.
it's going
You're
to
gonna
get out of your
perspire.
body at some point in time. And where's that go? Well,
Could go into the atmosphere. Could go potentially into the ground.
Yeah.
It's going to go into a toilet.
The water cycle.
It's going to go.
Yeah, the water cycle, right? And yes, it needs to be treated or cleaned or something needs to happen after the fact to get it fresh again.
Yeah.
But just because you're like, I almost look at it as like you're interrupting the process. You're kind of, I don't know, like pausing the water in a tank to then ultimately make it where it was going to go anyway, whether it's your plants, in your toilet, wherever.
It seems like, especially if you're going to save the water for your own use later, that seems much more efficient and cost effective than paying a company to deliver water to you. That sounds like a lot of other resources and environmental like hazards, using gas, to get there. It's like a lot more pollution than just simply collecting it yourself.
And that county where he lives, it's actually like, there's a term for it. It's not like a formal county.
Yes.
It's some kind of separate, like unregistered, whatever.
Yep.
That kind of made the news recently because they shifted. So basically they were hauling in water because none of the people there have any kind of plumbing. There's a few people that have wells, but it sounded like a few of those had run dry. So to get water at your residence, you would need to truck it in and haul water in. Well, they changed the pricing of it, and they said, I think a certain municipality couldn't deliver or the pricing went up. So then they had to go to another municipality, which came from further. And then that was more expensive. And so this whole concept, Tomas didn't build the system in response to that. He was just kind of ready for it because he already had the rainwater collection. And I think it's one of those cool things where we've done a lot of topics about growing your own food, knowing where your food comes from, but then something about like, well, where does your water come from? And traditionally, a lot of people think you have a well, and that is what most people have, or they have public utilities. But a few people over the countless videos they're not countless. I guess there's like 40 some episodes now. But over the period of time we've been working on Paragraphic, there's been Frugal Off Grid Harvest Rainwater, Green Dream, they had a rainwater collection, and then Tomas, I think. He was the first one we really focused on it because his setup was quite nice, I thought. And there may be a couple others, but very cool to see how much water you're able to collect from. Arizona, we're not known for the amount of rain we get.
Well, right, which makes it so of interest, right? It's like cactuses, right? It's like that's what they do. They harvest water, right? Yeah. So it's like very interesting that
kind of soak it up.
Yeah, and in a desert, it's like, why wouldn't a human do the same thing? Because if it only rains like during the monsoon season, let's say, it's like, well, where's all that water going to go anyway? Because it's going to be a flash flood and the water's just going to go to like away from where you'd want it to go. So why not preserve some of that for future?
Which I was just watching with my kids. So did you know Bear Grylls?
Yes. Yeah.
Man vs. Wild. He's got the new show You vs. Wild on Netflix. It's not new anymore, but it was new. Yeah,
is that like a take your own adventure
yes,
kind of thing?
It's interactive. You kind of pick and choose what he does. It's a little cheesy, a little silly, but it's in that same vein, the same formula of watching.
So it's professional Dora the Explorer.
Yes, exactly. But it was something I hadn't really thought of before, but one of the episodes. And of course, Bear Grylls isn't actually surviving in these scenarios. He's just teaching you. It's all made for television. It's just for show.
Yeah.
But he's in the desert, and he's like, yeah, if you need water in the desert, like you cut open a cactus, and there's water inside.
I thought he was going to drink his own pee or something.
No, he's done that.
That was if you chose the other option.
Yeah, you drink your own pee.
Yeah.
No, but you cut open a cactus, and there can be water inside because, like you described, the cactus soaks it all up and saves it for the months that go by when there isn't rain.
Oh, yeah.
And so, I guess Tomas is the same thing. He's kind of got a plastic cactus, multiple, tanks.
You could pee into a little reservoir and then have like a plastic tent over it, and you could collect water that way. Which
doesn't really hydrate you more, though. It just maintains your...
Yes.
It slows your dehydration.
Yeah.
It'll getting more hydrated.
The water, yeah. But, so to go back to the original question of like what was the most interesting, that to me was the most interesting, that some areas in the country would be against you harvesting water, which is something that literally happens naturally, with plants. So very interesting.
I think it's probably just a misunderstanding from people who don't really,
right.
They think of it a certain way, like you shouldn't be allowed to do that.
You're stealing from the natural habitat, but also just you being in the natural habitat is obviously you're competing with a lot of things. You're displacing, I'm sure, ants and insects. It's like all these things that make nature what it is. But in the desert, it's like, well, how else are you going to survive? You're going to need water. So,
and you can actually get quite a few gallons, like an absurd amount of water from not a small roof surface area, but you don't need like a football field size, catchment. A kind of regular house, a couple sheds can give you enough water, even for the limited amount it rains here. It can still be enough to support a couple people or a small family.
And he already was expanding his like the amount of tanks he had, which is great because I mean recently with this monsoon specifically, if anyone's paying attention, it's like was it the first like hurricane in the Southwest kind of thing? Like that kind of natural phenomenon doesn't happen all the time. So when it rains, it literally pours. So being prepared to collect as much as possible, like that's kind of where you want to be. And luckily he was set up for like that specific scenario.
And it's similar to, so the way we are here with rain is kind of like the way some people are with the sun elsewhere. So here the sun is abundant. So we're talking about solar power.
Solar.
You can have the panels, but usually more people talk about the importance of the battery. Storage is more important than
just
catchment.
Collecting it.
So same is true for rainwater here because you need the tanks to store it for a longer time. And then on the flip side, solar, a lot of people will say like, oh, solar's not possible where I live. It's not sunny enough. And like that's probably true to some extent, but it's really more in those areas, same with rainwater here, as like the storage. So if you have the batteries, which unfortunately are the most expensive part of the setup, you can do it and you can kind of make it work, but you have to balance that ratio, that equation of like, yes, making sure your catchment area, whether it's for solar or rain, is big enough, as well as making sure you have enough storage to get you through whatever season it is.
Yeah. The interesting part of how you get that water to be drinkable is another like interesting aspects as far as like putting in, I don't know, certain chemicals to make it drinkable, which I don't know
like
if
chlorine,
right, but it's understanding like the correct amount and then being willing to trust yourself and drink it at the end of the day, which I feel like a lot of people, it's like you're used to just opening the tap, right, and getting water, which as everyone probably knows by like the news, it's like certain municipalities can be just ruined by some contamination, and all of a sudden you have to boil your water or anything like that. So it's very interesting when a lot of people take it for granted, but then when you have to do it yourself, and I'm kind of referring to the comments where certain people were like, oh, you shouldn't do that, you shouldn't do that,
it's dangerous.
It's like, well, how do you know? For one.
Oh, yeah, right. Like you're in a city and you're just trusting.
Yeah, you're trusting the water is just going to be okay anyway.
Yeah.
So for
you're not
to
testing it for lead or anything else.
But Tomas over here is doing it himself, testing it, and he's living proof that it works. And he's not necessarily showing any side effects, and he's been doing it for a while. I just think it's interesting how people are so quick to like not only judge but just like ridicule people of like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that, like that's bad for you. It's like, what's bad for you living on your own land and like surviving for yourself?
Yeah, there's this weird like out of sight, out of mind concept where when you just trust the government to do it, oh, there's experts, the scientists, they'll figure it out for me.
Trust the science. It's like,
meanwhile, like you actually are getting it and you're not testing it yourself. You have no idea what's in your water.
Right.
Where someone who is doing it themselves gets blamed as being dangerous. It's similar to me of like the meat situation of someone is raising cows or cattle, or they got chickens, or they got whatever, and then more recently we filmed with someone who had rabbits, and the idea that like, oh my, but you have to kill them.
Yes. Yeah.
Go to the grocery store, every piece of meat there had to be killed.
Yes.
So just because you're not the one doing it or you're not the one thinking about it, you're still like reaping the benefits of eating the product, whatever it is. And you almost like it's almost sick and twisted in kind of an ironic sense that you're getting those gains, you're getting the product, but you don't have any of the knowledge of how it got there.
Right.
And now you get to blissfully just think like, oh, it's fine. Meanwhile, you show someone how it's done and they go, you're a terrible person.
Right.
And they blame the person doing it. Meanwhile, they're just as guilty. They just don't realize it.
Well, and putting chemicals in the water to make it drinkable, like it sound like when you say chlorine, it's like you're drinking chlorine. It's like, well, it's this much chlorine. It's diluted by this huge tank of water.
And he was running it through an RO system after the fact.
Yeah.
So all of it's filtered out later too.
And we tried the water.
It was great.
Fantastic. Yeah. RO systems are fantastic. But it's interesting when people are quick to go to the grocery store and not necessarily know what kind of maybe pesticides were possibly used on, the fresh fruit that they just purchased. But it's, out of sight, out of mind. That's for sure.
So what's kind of cool about this video, Rainwater Collection, is doing quite well. It's actually, I don't know if people care to know. So far, it's earned $1,000 on YouTube in revenues. We talk about that sometimes, monetization. Woo! Still doesn't quite cover all the costs of production, but hey, it's better than $10. So it's doing quite well. People are very into it. What's cool, though, is we also did a behind the scenes that will be posted over on the Patreon account. So if you want to see the behind the scenes, that's on Patreon, and people can go sign up and subscribe there. But the other thing I was going to say is that I thought the coolest part of Tomas's house was that he built it as a modern house.
Yes.
So a lot of off-grid, even stuff we did like frugal off-grid. It's got this very like quaint, small, simple, lots of things built out of pallets or wood, or the whole idea is that it's cheap. Yeah. It's funny when you get traction on a video, the amount of comments of people who don't quite get it, because they'll look at Tomas's house and they'll say like, oh, it must be nice to have all that money. And like you're not really living off grid because you have all these amenities. And his whole point is that it is possible to live in a modern, nice home that isn't cheap and made of plywood and pallets, but still being off-grid, still being self-sufficient, a little bit more, being sustainable, that kind of thing. So doing solar, doing rainwater collection, having more control of the ingredients in your own life, but doing it in a way where you're still comfortable. He can take a shower. He can do his laundry. He can do all the things that regular people who live in the city do. He just happens to be doing it in this, what used to be conventional, but now is a little unconventional, but just doing it in a way that makes it make sense for a modern environment. And I thought that was cool, but unfortunately kind of gets lost on a few people who are commenting saying how expensive it is.
Right. And he did not do that all at once. Like that is something that also, which we never, I guess we didn't cover the house or necessarily the fact that he built it himself. So he put a lot of design elements into that house that is modern, but also very functional. So he has large windows, so he doesn't have to run as much electricity throughout the day. And he has huge, like a patio with a huge like shaded area, right? So like the house stays cool, like the patio, like there's areas to be comfortable where you don't necessarily need air conditioning. So it's a very modern house, but again, he built it himself. Like the whole garden area started out very small. He only started out with like, was it 2 tanks in the beginning for water? So it's very much like a progression. So it's, granted, we didn't again cover the house and like the how long it took him to build or anything, but it was something that he had planned for definitely and like years in advance, and then was able to execute the plan once they found a piece of property and they knew where they wanted to go and everything. But yeah, it wasn't just one day he bought a piece of land and had the house built with everything there.
Right. A lot of these things can be done smaller, can be done larger, can be done more affordably, more expensive. You can do it over time, like you were saying, build on. And I did think it was interesting. A lot of times we don't film in people's homes. Sometimes they're just not. There's something more personal and intimate that's like a privacy thing, probably more than anything. And oftentimes it isn't like all that interesting to look at. I sometimes think seeing the nature, seeing outside is more interesting. But when we had lunch inside, I noticed they didn't have any TVs on the walls. Yeah. Which I thought was kind of cool and kind of fun and not common anymore to go into a living room and there's no television.
Which I did ask him about that when we were having lunch, and I mean, they have iPads, so that they have, cell phones. So a lot of their entertainment comes from consuming it that way. And of course they have the natural stars, like it's much less light pollution where they live. So they have nature to kind of like experience instead of watching a TV, I guess. But it's nice. I don't know. I thought that was a very interesting lifestyle, like the modern off-grid. Like I think I commented in on that video, and I was like, oh, it'd be nice to purchase a place like this one day. And I think he was like, yeah, just let me know. Let me know, because that honestly is a situation that I would enjoy living in, right? A much more modern house, not necessarily like a teepee. Or like a shack. It's like, no, like I like the idea of building something that, has a lot of natural light, because I don't know, because we're photographers or something.
And it was concrete too, right? Which you tend to prefer. I feel like concrete, aesthetically, you like that look
industrial look. Yeah, concrete. It's just, I don't know, timeless, I think.
Yeah. It's fun to see all the shapes and sizes that this stuff can come in. You can do the small and simple, you can do the big and extravagant, and really find a way to make it fit your budget. I mean, I just put a solar panel on my minivan with a battery on the inside, and that's a very small version, but like I wanted to do it personally because I don't have solar at my house, and I was just curious. I was like, how do these systems even work? Like, how easy is it? How much power is it generating? And just starting even with something small to kind of figure it out is where I love to start. That's been my garden too. It's like put a tree in, see how it grows, add more over time, and eventually you get this like, I don't know, you get something that's quite impressive and people look at it and go, oh, must be nice.
It's something that a lot of people, again, take for granted. So Fred Wong, we also recently published that video, and it's about his orchard.
We got to save that for the next episode. Spoilers.
My bad.
Cut that out. We're not going to cut it out. We don't do any editing on this.
Well, that being said, we'll save a majority of that conversation for
coming soon. Stay tuned.
Podcast.
It's a little teaser.
But no, it's like what you were saying, like taking a part of like what we shot and then trying to do it ourselves, right? It's you've gone a little bit further than me as far as like actually being able to like garden. Like I don't have the space for a garden currently, but in the future, like mentally I have plans for like what, I don't know, my optimal layout or design would be. 'Cause again, like using light to your advantage is something that, especially if you position your house properly, you can kind of like benefit more from like the afternoon light or the morning light. I don't know if you want to talk about another video, but
probably not.
Okay, well,
which one are you talking about?
Is it Angela's garden?
Yeah, no, not yet.
Yeah,
no,
okay, well, all right, another podcast video, we'll talk about that.
We've only published the Tomas Rainwater collection video.
Yes. Okay, well.
Wink, wink.
Yeah, all right, fine. But all I'm saying is, as opposed to just buying, let's say, like a tract home, where those houses are built like in a community and the house can be pointed any which direction, you don't necessarily have a say in like the best, like optimal design or where you're going to put plants, whatever you want.
Yeah.
So in my mind, I'm like, I'm going to buy a plot of land and then position my house facing a certain way so that I can really maximize like daylight and where it's hitting the property. But again, doing all these videos, definitely just more information, more fuel for like my like ultimate dream setup. But I don't know, I just nerd out every time we go on these video shoots because I'm like, I didn't even think about that. Like mentally, I'll be prepared. So if I, have like my own little plot of land, like I'll know what to do.
Yeah, so for interior, your windows, if you're in the northern hemisphere, you want the northern exposure for your windows. So your windows are facing the north. But for your solar panels, your roof, you want that facing the south.
Yep.
So you'll get the most energy production that way.
Yeah.
Lots of things to take into consideration that you cannot do unless you are building yourself on like, an acre or whatever you have.
Yeah. And it's, oh man, there's so many videos that I want to talk about. Because speaking of solar panels and keeping them up to par, because like especially in the valley here, like in Arizona specifically.
Oh, you want to talk about pigeons?
Oh yeah, a little bit, but maybe we'll save that for another podcast.
We gotta save it.
We gotta save it for another one. But I will say briefly, it is very important to maintain that equipment, because if you don't, then like why even have it, right? It's like if you're gonna go down that route of solar panels, you got to make sure they're clean so that they're actually absorbing and you can actually do something with that.
Yeah.
But
no, I love the commonalities between different people, different lifestyles. You can see how some people like to live a certain way, other people prefer a different way, but there are these through lines of just having more control. I mean, there's a sustainability aspect, but I feel like most people are doing it more selfishly, which I think is actually a good way to promote good things. Is
it selfish or is it?
Well, selfish is a loaded
responsible
word. It's a loaded word.
I feel like it's responsible.
People
being able to take care of yourself, like that's pretty responsible, I would think, instead of relying on.
It is, but most people, when you're talking like individually, you could talk to a person and they might do like the right thing because it's good for the planet or good for somebody else. But I think most people collectively, everyone's kind of like, well, what's in it for me? And when you're living out in the middle of nowhere and there isn't a power company, and the power company comes to you and says, yeah, if you want electricity on your property, you got to pay us $100,000 to run the line.
To run the lines, yeah.
And then you got to pay us $100, $300, $500 a month for that service we're providing you. So you're like, why am I going to pay you to run a line just to keep paying you?
Yes.
Versus, hey, you could actually spend $50,000 on a solar setup and then never have a bill for the rest of your life.
And maintain it.
Yeah, maintenance and repairs. And that is where you get these people go like, well, that just makes sense. Like, that's what I'm going to do. And it's selfish, but not in like the negative loaded sense.
Yes.
But it is for your best interest, your self-interest, to take this upon yourself and not be reliant on the power company or the people hauling in water, and just take kind of ownership over your life.
Yeah, and it's readily accessible sunlight, right? So it's
Here
especially
it is.
Yes, if you live in a state or region that has a certain thing that's in abundance, why not take advantage of it?
Totally.
But
instead of
a lot of people don't.
Yeah, they don't maybe see the benefit, or like, and I think Tommaso is interesting. He says it in the video, and I don't know how well people understood what he was trying to say, but the idea that like, if you just built homes like this,
Yes.
the construction cost would be relatively the same, because if you're building the house from scratch, what does it matter how you build it?
Right.
Yes, it might be a little bit more expensive in certain areas, but ultimately it's kind of a wash. The expensive part is when you have an old home that was built for one system, and then you're now retrofitting it with all the new systems. Yeah, that's expensive when you're adding it onto something that already exists. But if you just started this way, you would actually get people to live a very independent, self-sufficient life just from the start, and they wouldn't be worried about brownouts, blackouts with the electric grid. They wouldn't be worried about
food prices or
their water being tainted because the filtration plant didn't do their job properly. Like, a lot of the common problems we have, not common, but the problems that are becoming more and more apparent as old systems, the legacy systems start to like struggle.
Pipes eroding, all that stuff. Yeah.
You just build it like this from the beginning, and you can still be in a community. You can still be in the city. You could be wherever you want to be, but now you have this added benefit, and it didn't really cost you anything,
right?
Because it's just part of the house.
And a video we have done in the past, the community garden video, right? You're seeing less and less of those. When I lived in downtown Phoenix, there was a community garden that was there for years and had just gone defunct because the community wasn't about that life. I guess like nobody actually wanted to help take care of a garden. But in Sholo, where we went to go film that community garden, that was very active. Like, people readily were available to participate, and they were actively getting the younger children in the community up to speed on how to garden and why it's important to have a community garden, and just having people go there and benefit from it by, submitting a few hours, but then walking away with a basket of produce. And it's like, how is that not something that you want in your community?
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe we're getting older, and so we appreciate these things more than like we did when we were younger. That's certainly like the transition I've seen in my life, just the awareness and going like, yeah, this is something I value now. And you probably, I don't know if you'll be able to convince a 20-year-old that's something important.
Maybe the younger generations are maybe more easily persuaded into like doing it yourself, possibly.
Maybe.
I think, I don't know, maybe it was like our generation of, you need to go to college so you get a good job so you can afford whatever you want. But like, that's
to buy things at the grocery store.
To buy things. But then you complain about, people in general complain about the prices. It's like, can you believe eggs, are 3 times more expensive? It's like, well, if you had a chicken, it could be technically like around the same price or like up a fraction depending on what you're feeding the chicken, right? And
we're not talking. We can't talk about
spoilers.
Chicken feed.
We also have other.
We have a lot of videos in progress.
We have a lot of videos that are
people haven't seen yet. We've seen.
Yes, people are going to be surprised at some of the videos. They're not only on the garden. We're going to be going to Vegas in a few of our videos. Well, in one of our videos specifically.
No, it's when I was 20, I don't think I cared about gardening. I know for a fact I didn't.
Oh, no?
Yeah, it wasn't until, I don't know, late 20s. I guess when you have like kids and it was like more of like thinking about your family.
Gardening for produce or just like having plants? Because like, have you had houseplants? Did you ever have to take care of any houseplants?
I'm not big into houseplants, and I don't know why. It just seems like it doesn't give me a lot.
Other than like decor, because like I like the look of houseplants and like the vibe it gives off of like nature indoors, especially here when it's so hot that a lot of people are kind of indoors like most of the summer.
But see, I look at it, I'm like, that's nature. That's not supposed to be indoors. Set it free.
No,
let it go.
Like, but
what are you trapping that plant inside for?
Yeah, dude, it likes to live inside. I'm sure it would die. I accidentally left a plant outside and it immediately just wilted.
No, my
like
natural habitat.
Hour, yeah. Luckily, I was able to bring it back. But yeah, that was kind of scary. I was very upset.
No, I like gardening from more like the farming side of things, like growing
having
your
a harvest.
food. Yeah, like, and it does bring me a lot of joy to look in my backyard now and see like greenery. And whereas before it was like rocks and like a shrub.
Yes.
And now it's actually like quite plentiful. And next year it'll be even more. I'm gonna have a lot of peaches next year. I'm gonna have tons of great stuff growing back there.
So
just got some guava off the tree. Actually, it was very. I don't even like guava, but I like it off my tree. I don't know. It tastes good. I don't even like it. I don't even like it. The guy, when I bought that guava tree, I was looking for a mulberry tree, I think. And I got guava instead.
It sounds like a Dimitri Martin skit. It's like, hi, do you have a size 11? It's like, no, we have a size 10.
Great.
I
was looking for a mulberry tree.
Not at all what we discussed.
And I got the mulberry tree. It's a dwarf mulberry tree. But it's actually like very large. Like this tree has grown just incredibly well in my backyard. But at the same time, he's like, I also have a guava tree. Like that's I like them. The guy.
What is guava? Is it like it sounds like an artificial sweetener.
Guava? Yeah. Like you mean like agave?
Yes.
Because no, it's different. So guava is like a fruit. The ones on my tree are about the size of. They're smaller than a plum. They're not very large, and they kind of have quite a few seeds inside that are like hard seeds. I think you can eat them.
It's like it's hardly even edible.
Yeah, but you can't. But like I wouldn't like the seeds are more like a popcorn kernel texture. So like you don't really want to like chew on those. But the fruit is kind of I've heard it described as being funky,
like feet.
Not like feet.
What did we eat at what was his garden?
Where were we
the
at?
Backyard garden.
And we ate
Whose was
Justin's?
It? Yeah, Justin's garden.
What did he?
Papaya.
Papaya.
He had something papaya. He was like, just tastes like feet. I was like,
yeah, I don't. Not a papaya.
You probably
fan.
should have told me that after. It's like, let me taste it first.
Guava. It has like a little bit of funk to it, but my son says it tastes like a peach a little bit. But they're small and they have seeds inside. But the flavor you would get, they're oftentimes in like fruit drinks, like a guava beverage or something. The actual fruit tastes really, really good when it's fresh off the tree. Yeah. And the tree actually has turned out quite beautiful. When I bought the tree, it was like a stick, like the thinnest, longest, just like stick with like a couple leaves off of it. And I was like, this thing looks like it's gonna die. Yeah. I planted it in the backyard. It's done great. And now this is the first year I've had fruit off of it. There's only like four pieces of fruit, but next year it's that thing. It's like almost exponential growth with a lot of the trees. It starts with like a couple berries or a couple pieces of fruit, and then the next year or two you get like way more. Almost to the point where it's absurd. Where speaking of some of the videos we've filmed, right?
Yeah, you're gonna need friends and family to come.
Oh
over
yeah, there's like it just rots because there's so much of it, and that's what I think people don't realize or take into consideration. Where it's so hard to grow food. Why would I grow like a strawberry? I can go to the grocery store and get a whole box, for $1, $5, whatever it is. But there's a certain point where it reaches the tipping point where the tree has so much fruit that you cannot keep up. Yes. And then you realize, nature is abundant. You have to have the patience to get there.
Right. But you also don't need to grow that much. Right, there was, I won't say the video, but we
still coming.
Yeah, it's still coming. Dude, there's so many that we need to talk about in the future. But this fellow has strawberries that he was growing, and he doesn't have a lot of strawberry like plants or anything, but it's just enough so that when he's in the garden, he can just pop a few in his mouth. And
that was Tomas.
No, well, Tomas as well, but there was another one who actually talked about it. This was Scott.
Okay. Because Tomas has the same kind of thing. Because his garden. So going back to the rainwater collection video,
he does. I forgot about his.
What's cool is that he's kind of the opposite of some of the people that we film. A lot of people, gardening is pretty easy to get into. You can go to Home Depot and buy plants, and it's common enough that it's like a lifestyle that people embrace. And so they get into growing their own food, and then over time they do like the solar or the rainwater, or they do composting or whatever. Tomas is kind of the opposite, where he did like the solar, the rainwater for the house, and then was like, oh, I want to grow food. And so the gardening has been like his learning curve, because his background's in construction and building things, where like gardening is the newer thing. And I find other people it's like the opposite. So it's cool to see those parallels and the different paths people are on and how they get there. But I did like seeing that he was attempting to learn how to grow his own food, and that being a goal. And I think this is also missed on a lot of people, that they think if you're not doing it 100%, you're not doing it at all. Like, meaning like if you're not surviving with your own food, if you're going to the grocery store, that's cheating. Or like, oh, you went to Walmart or you ordered something on Amazon, that's cheating. And that's such a high bar to set, where it's basically everyone is destined to fail unless they're doing it perfectly in your eyes. Where I actually just like the people who are trying, experimenting. Yeah, like you can still go to Walmart, you can still buy things on Amazon, but the more you do, the
you're just supplementing, like, I don't know, a lot of money, maybe financial woes, because again, going back to like people's frustration with how much organic food costs, it's like, well, if you grew it yourself, it could be a fraction of it. You just have to put in like the time and whatever that costs you.
Right.
But
it would just be like, you're probably not going to go, some people aren't going to go zero waste overnight. You're not going to cut all your trash out of your life. But it's like, okay, 10%, 20% reduction, then you get to 30%, 50%. Over the next 10 years, if every year you're making progress, well, by the end of it, all of a sudden you've made this radical change, even though in the short term, it was only like a small adjustment.
Right.
But over time, it all adds up. And I think that's just lost on a lot of people, or they like take it for granted or don't want to think about it, and kind of blame people for, well, you're not growing all your food. It's like, well, do I have to grow all my food?
all of it,
Like, eventually that's the goal. I want to get there, but like, this is the step on that path.
I always find it interesting when people like comment those things, but I'm very positive that those people aren't growing anything, potentially. So it's, they're taking a whack at somebody who's like actively doing it. It's just like, well, this guy is clearly doing it. Come on, like, let him live his life. But it's, I don't know, very inspiring. So one day I look very forward to having my own garden, because I love strawberries. I would love to grow strawberries.
Strawberries are a very beautiful plant. I think the leaves are quite nice. And when the strawberries are on there, it's a little trick I've heard that you can do. I haven't done this personally, but I've heard that you can paint the rocks red. Have you heard this?
What?
So birds like strawberries, and they come eat your strawberries.
Yeah. So trick them and they'll break their beaks.
Sort of.
That's brutal.
So before you get fruit on the strawberry plant, you have like red painted rocks, like they paint rocks that look like strawberries. I think they can even buy these.
So
things.
they don't even want to attempt it.
So the birds come check it out.
And
they know, oh, that's a fake strawberry.
Yeah.
Then once the real strawberries show up, they think they're fakes.
Yeah.
And so they don't come after them.
Nice. That's a good trick.
Because birds are smart, but they're also dumb.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I wouldn't attempt it. It's like if I went to McDonald's and they had rocks for burgers, I'd be like, I'm not going to that place.
now we'll put out the good stuff.
Yeah, no, put out the burgers.
Kept them away. I don't know. But anyways, there is a behind the scenes for the Tomas video, which is cool. That'll be on Patreon once that's posted. Is there anything else that was enlightening or interesting that you thought?
I mean, I'm always fascinated with just like the greenhouse setups. Maybe it's like the cinematic side for me personally, but I was like, man, the lighting in here looks great. But it's like having a greenhouse is just something that's always kind of fascinated me, which they weren't entirely greenhouses, right? It's like, because greenhouses aren't, I don't know, very sustainable, I would say, here. It's like you want a room that has like shade, but not necessarily a greenhouse, because you're not trying to trap anything in there.
Right. So because even like the greenhouse effect, like what was it, Inconvenient Truth, climate change, when it first made it big on the scene, it was like the greenhouse effect, and we're trapping all the heat in the planet, and that's why global warming's happening. A greenhouse traditionally is used to keep things warmer, because even like your car sitting in the sun, it's hotter in the car than it is, even though it's in the same environment. It's like the
hot air.
So here it doesn't.
What do you call those?
What?
Or what did he call them? Are they greenhouses, or are they just more controlled
community garden? She called it a high tunnel. I think there's a couple other names for it, but any kind of like enclosure to maybe more like a climate controlled environment. And people were asking about Tomas's because it was like the white covering.
Yes.
And people hadn't seen that before. They'd seen like the
Yeah,
clear.
I love the white.
Yeah,
the white's
it's cool.
great.
Yeah, it looks awesome.
So nice.
Which makes more sense here when you want it to be more shaded and less intense with the sun, whereas other places they want it, when it starts getting colder, you want that greenhouse to stay warm so your plants stay healthy. Plants like that controlled,
more like humid.
Yeah, controlled, humid, warmer temperature to grow well. And so here we just kind of do the opposite, try and keep things shaded, keep them cool. He had some fans running in there.
Yeah, to get the heat out, which was at the top of the canopy because obviously hot air rises, so push it right out.
Yep. So there's some stuff you can do, and I've had varying levels of success in my own garden using shade structures of some kind. Most places that grow here are using shade during the summer months because it just gets so hot and unbearable. Not only is the temperature hot and plants don't like that, but then the sun as well is just really intense.
Yeah, which I mean, I don't know. It's so easy. Well, what's interesting about Arizona is your plants can freeze and also just burn. So you have to find the sweet spot, and there are like advisories that will go out like over the news here that says like, hey, by the way, like cover your plants or cover your trees because it will freeze and like the frost will literally just destroy.
The winter.
Yeah, in the winter.
Yeah. So a trick I've heard for that is Christmas lights. Have you heard this?
No.
So if you have the old school Christmas lights, the incandescents that actually get a little warm, if you wrap trees in Christmas lights, that a little bit of heat
Just
that
keeps
the light
them nice and warm.
keeps them warm enough that they
On
won't
the
freeze.
outside
Yeah.
or like the inside of the tree, like the core of the tree?
Like the trunk. And
Okay.
yeah, just like Christmas lights within your garden. Now I haven't tested this myself, but it's something I've heard that you can do in the winter when it gets because here it doesn't get super cold, negative anything.
No, it just
but
drops
it is
down to
cold
like
enough,
the 50s or 40s or something like that. And
Yeah.
like that could
or even like
shock
25
a tree. Yeah.
So to control that, you can do Christmas lights. And then in the summer, what's cool here, because it's such a dry heat, a couple places we filmed do the evaporative cooling. So it's a lot cheaper than air conditioning, which is incredibly expensive and cost prohibitive. But you can use a swamp cooler, evaporative cooler to keep the space at like between the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
And have pretty good success with that here because it's so dry. In places where it's humid, you can't really do that because it doesn't actually cool the air.
Right.
But here we have some cool benefits, some little tricks, some little hacks we can do to make it more comfortable.
I wonder how cost effective it is to grow. Like it would take a long time, obviously, to grow a tree for shade purposes, like to cover your house. But there are a lot of homes like in the valley that do benefit from having the shade from a large tree. And it's like, I often wonder, it's like, well, how much does that really cost? Like if you're paying for water to keep that tree alive, it's like, what offset is that from like your air conditioning or AC bill? And is it worth growing like vines on the side of your home, just to prevent the heat from like hitting like the block wall, for instance? But I don't know. It's just like the benefits of nature in general. It's like there's so many benefits and you can use it for like obviously like more than just decor. Like I know we have a few plants, fake plants, mind you, these are fake, but it's so interesting how people use it for food, for like not necessarily shelter, but shelter. Just so many benefits, but people choose not to take advantage of nature.
Yeah. Well, there's some cool experiments. Have you seen the paint now that is like a cooling paint?
No. Is it reflective?
Is
it white?
It's white.
So use it white.
But it also, what does it do? It like scatters the light, and specifically, I think infrared or something. I have to send you a video. What's the guy's name? It's a YouTube channel. I think it's Nighthawk. I don't know. When you start talking, I'll look it up.
Okay.
But I'll send you the video. There's a cool paint that is actually cooling, and so it's an interesting technology where the way they've made this paint in the past, like doesn't really, it's like kind of hard to make the materials, but there's some newer methods of making this paint that's a lot more available. I think it's like, I forget what he uses. It's probably like baking soda and a couple other chemical reactions create this compound that can be put into paint that then literally cools itself. Like even when it's hot, the surface will be colder than the temperature around it.
Which is kind of interesting because of course Arizona, if you've ever been to Phoenix, Arizona, you will notice that maybe 90% of the vehicles here are white because it is extremely hot. And if you have any dark colored vehicle, it is an oven if you get inside, especially during the summer months, and you will burn yourself with your seatbelt. And
yes,
ideally you would want tinted windows. Yeah, it gets brutal here during the summer, which luckily a lot of the shoots that we've been doing are kind of outside of the hot zone, because Phoenix, as it becomes bigger, there's more asphalt, there's more concrete, and it feels so much hotter than what it might say that the temperature is. Just because it's like you're walking around on a skillet. It's kind of unbearable.
So there is the concrete jungle effect. What do they call that? Is that what it's called? Concrete.
I know what a concrete jungle is, but I'm sure there's something.
There's a
like that.
heating thing associated with concrete and asphalt and all this stuff. There's a term for it. I'm forgetting right now. But I think they don't want to tell you.
Oh yeah, conspiracy time. Great for the end of the podcast.
I think it's truly air conditioning.
What? Big AC? You think it's big?
To make people comfortable in the heat, they have to run the AC. The more people that are running AC, the more hot air is being put out. Because if you've ever been by an air conditioner,
yes,
it exhausts hot air.
Oh yeah.
Think of all the people who now are running air conditioning, pumping hot air out.
Yes.
The more of those, like, that has to make it hotter.
Yeah, that is kind of funny.
And it gets
like
hotter.
If everyone's using a hairdryer.
Yes.
Like at once.
Yeah. But think about that. The hotter it gets, the more people want to run their AC, and therefore the hotter it gets. So I think there's like a diminishing returns point where, like, you keep adding the thing that is keeping you personally comfortable, but is collectively hurting everyone.
Yeah. And people are ridiculous. Like, people will set their thermostat to 65 and put on a blanket inside. Because I'm just like, what do you... And, of course, like, what you're talking about is, meanwhile, just spewing hot air into the already hot valley.
So I think there's something to that, because while, yes, there's been more concrete and more asphalt been put in, and, you know... For all the reasons people say, the one thing I don't think people talk enough about is just the amount of air conditioning that's out there. And the more people that run it, like, it has to make things hotter. It has to.
Definitely. It's cars, just everything just being on, more pollution, more everything. Yeah.
Right. But air conditioning is the one thing that, inside all these boxes, we make it cooler, but outside we make it hotter every time we run it. Nighthawk in Light is the YouTube channel of the cooler paint. Nighthawk in Light.
Nighthawk in Light.
Yeah. He's got a good channel. It's like science, technology, experimental type stuff. And he's got if you search cooling paint on YouTube, you find it right away.
Interesting. Yeah, it's completely opposite of, what is that, like pure black paint?
Vanta Black?
Phantom Black, yeah.
Which gets hot.
Yeah, I was going to say, I was like, that probably just gets hot.
It absorbs so much light that it warms itself up.
Yeah. Ooh.
So yeah, basically the polar opposite,
literally,
of that. And yeah, I think it's cool that we can find these ways to experiment and make life more. I already took mine for the day, so I don't need any.
Yes, I'm just gonna take these mushroom gummies.
The Poker gummies are really good.
We're not running any ads.
Not this one
in this episode.
But I will say that the lion's mane, if you go search lion's mane on Amazon, you'll find a lot of lion's mane extract. And the Boca lion's mane is just regular powdered lion's mane. It's not an extract. So everyone gets to listen to you chew. People hate that. There's certain people.
That kind of sounded like Maggie from The Simpsons.
Oh, it did, like sucking on the... Yeah. So if you want some good mushroom supplements, as well as other supplements, like the lion's mane actually is... good lion's mane. It's not just an extract, it's the powdered stuff. And I think it helps me personally, I would say, with focus and just kind of that like procrastination. I feel like we all get a little bit, where it's like, I don't want to work on that. Like I'm gonna look at my phone, I'm gonna check my email, I'm gonna scroll on YouTube and feel like I'm doing something, being productive. I find that when I take the lion's mane, I do that less, and I actually do the thing I know I need to do more. And I don't know why that is. Maybe it's placebo, but I think for me, it actually, like, functionally, when I don't take the lion's mane, I tend to be more procrastinating.
Yeah, I think subconsciously, the more you do to, like, better yourself, you're almost like putting yourself on that path, and you know you're on that path. So like any deviation from that path feels like you're probably you know, like cheating on yourself almost,
Oh,
right?
okay.
So it's like, if, all right, I'm on like a health diet, a health food kick. It's like, if you eat a hamburger, you might, you know, it's like why do that to yourself? So like, if you're in this path of eating lion's mane and it makes you feel good, like why would you deviate? It's like, no, this is clearly making me feel better. I'm going to continue doing this. Like we were talking about working out earlier in the podcast. It's just like, yeah, the moment you like step off the wagon, it's like, well, are you going to want to get back on the wagon? Is it too difficult? But after you've had the benefits of something that's like, well, this makes me feel fantastic, why would I go eat that double cheeseburger?
Well, that's the thing. I ran out of the Boca lion's mane, and we didn't have it in stock for a little bit, but it's back in stock now. And I was looking at like other options out there of like, okay, how can I order some? And that's what made me discover it on Amazon. Then a lot of them are just like extract. And I don't know that that's necessarily worse or anything like that, but it just seems like, why would you just give me the powder? Like, I just want the lion's mane. Like, why make more steps? Yeah. Less steps. And that's how I approach everything we do, where it's like, don't overcomplicate it, keep it simple. And that usually gets you the best results.
That's what we do. But I feel like marketing in general is always, this is extra. Like, don't you want this? Because this is bonus. You know, it's like, buy this and you get this free thing too. It's like, nah, I'm all good. Like, I
just want the simple
just
thing.
want that. It's like protein, I feel like is like that in a lot of foods. Like you'll go, I don't know, down any aisle and it's like, there's waffles and then there's protein waffles. It's like, well, why? I'll just get the protein and then I'll just drink that separately to get like my supplements.
Yeah, instead of your protein waffles.
Yeah, it's just like, well, I like regular waffles.
Well, the last thing I was going to say I thought was fun about Tomas's place is the dog that ate the salad, the lettuce. I thought that was really funny. The one dog didn't like the leafy greens, and the other dog loved them. And I don't know what that says about dogs, or that dog in particular.
That's a healthy dog.
Yeah.
That's what that is. Well, that dog will live beyond its years.
But I just liked it. I liked seeing a dog eat lettuce. Because growing up, we had dogs that would eat grass. They would eat grass all the time.
Yeah, we had a tortoise that we fed.
It's a little different.
Yeah, what? No, this tortoise loved apples.
Yeah.
I'd make tuna and apples, and then I'd give the core, you know, to the tortoise, and it loved it.
Yeah.
You know.
We just had, well, I guess I got to save it for the next video. But we just had some crawdads, some crawfish as pets. But
pets?
Yeah.
Or food?
Pets. But I'll have to,
how?
I'll have to save it for
Like
another
pet 'em?
podcast. It'll actually be, we know what, we can talk about it in the next podcast.